We begin today's shiur at the Mishnah that you'll find toward the lower part of the narrow lines, if you prefer, 19 lines from the top. As you look in the text, you'll notice a marking that resembles a volcano or trapezoid shape. On the side of the Gemara, we have a nosei mivneh heading where we've written that we will see shnei maisim, two incidents, the shamu de meis ploni, wherein we learn that so-and-so is dead, and of course with the ramifications of the widow being able to remarry, avol loi ro'u o lo zihu mi ze she'omar. They heard the news, but they didn't see who the news bearer was, or they didn't recognize him. The Mishnah, Me'idim L'or Haner L'or Halavana, testimony concerning the body, namely identification of the body, can be made at candlelight, with candlelight, or in the light of the moon, meaning at night with the moon casting its light. Umasiin al pi baskoil, and the woman can receive permission to remarry based on information that you received through what the Mishnah calls a baskol. Now, we'll define baskol with Rashi, al pi baskol, shamu koil soyekes. A voice was heard screaming, ploini meis, so-and-so is dead, velo rou adam b'tzalmo, and no physical person was seen who was saying that. So, a voice was heard, but no body associated with the voice. That's enough to allow the woman to remarry. There was an incident where someone was standing on a mountaintop and saying, Ish ploini ben ploni mimokoim ploini meis. So-and-so, the son of so-and-so, from so-and-so, such and such a place, is dead. Holchu v'lo motzu sham adam. They went there, didn't find anybody there, and didn't see anyone on the top of that mountain. And nevertheless, that was enough for them to have the woman remarry. V'shuv ma'aseh b'tzalmoin, there was an incident in a place called Tzalmoin. Be'echad shomar, there was someone that was saying, Ani ish ploni ben ploni, I am so and so, the son of so and so. Noshchani nochosh varei ani meis. I've been bitten by a venomous snake, and I am about to die. V'holchu v'lo hikiru, they went there and didn't recognize him. V'holchu v'hesio es ishto. In other words, they heard this information with the name, and they went to the wife of that person. Though they didn't recognize him, the fact that he proclaimed his identity was enough. Omar Rabbo Bar Shmuel Tana, the Tanaic source says, Beishamai Omrim Ein Masin Alpi Baskol. One cannot enable a woman to remarry based on information that you hear from a mere voice. Beis Hillel Omrim Masin Alpi Baskoil, and Beis Hillel says you can. The Gemara asks, what do I need Rabbo Bar Shmuel's source for, in which Beis Hillel, which is the recognized authority when you see a machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, Beis Hillel represents the more accepted way of ruling. What do I need Rabbo Bar Shmuel to present this source to me? My komash malon masnisin he. This information, in fact, is reflected by our Mishnah. Our Mishnah doesn't have a name in it, and our Mishnah being an unnamed Mishnah, we call a Stam Mishnah, that itself is authoritative. So I understand that is the way the halacha goes. So what do I now know that I didn't know before, thanks to Rabbo Bar Shmuel? The Gemara answers, Ha Komash Malon. The following is that which Rabbo Bar Shmuel conveys. The Di'i mishtakis stamo di'ein masian. If you should ever find an unnamed Tanaic source in which it says ein masian al pi baskoil, then you will know beis shamai hi, that source, even though it's unnamed, is basically not authoritative, because or the halacha will not follow that, because it is the opinion of beis shamai. V'holchu v'lo motzu. The Mishnah related that they didn't find the source of the voice, and yet they relied on it as reliable testimony for the woman to remarry. The Gemara has a series of questions, and you can see we've marked them off accordingly, with this marking that under our mivneh on the side you can see we have this marking indicating she'elos, a series of questions. V'dilma sheidhu, maybe it was a demon, and that's certainly not a reliable source of information. Omar Rabbi Yehuda Omar Rav shero'u loy demus adam. They saw a human image when the screaming and the voice started to be heard. The Gemara asks, well, inu nami domu. These demons also have a human form. The Gemara answers, Dechazu le babua. They saw a shadow as well. The Gemara asks, Ve'inhu nami is lehu babua, but they also have a shadow. Answer, Dechazu le babua de babua. The Rashi says on babua, it says tseil siloi. Elsewhere in the Shas, you see the expression tseil silo to mean a shadow whose length is greater than the height of the person himself. So maybe that's the intent of the term babua de babua. And the Gemara asks, V'dilmo lididhu islu babua de babua. Maybe the shadow cast by the demon could be of that nature as well. So how can they rely on the information? Omar Rabbi Chanina, Omar li Yoinasan Shida. Rabbi Chanina tells us that this individual, two pshatim in two explanations of who he was. Either he himself was a demon, or he was an expert in demons. But we refer to him here as Yoinasan Shida told me. Babua islu, babua de babua leslu. They have a shadow, but an increased length shadow that they don't have. And being that in this particular Mishnah, they had seen this image with a long shadow, that is enough for us to conclude that it's a reliable source. The Dilmot Sorahaboy, maybe it was a co-wife, and we've learned in previous Mishnayos that a co-wife is not reliable. Tana debei Rabbi Shmuel, B'shas hasakona, Kaisvin v'noisnin af al pi she'ein makirin. At a time of pressing or extenuating circumstances, we will write a get and give it to the woman, even if we don't recognize the source of the information. Where we don't recognize, in the case of a get, the source or the man who is saying to have the get written. So this source that's taught in the Yeshiva Rabbi Shmuel deals with a get, and we are dealing with information concerning the death of a man. But either way, you can see that when there are extenuating circumstances, and in our case, our Shasa Sakona is that if we don't believe the Baskol, then the woman will remain unmarried. She'll remain an aguna. So for our purposes, just like in the case of the writing of a get, we have this leniency, and we can look in Rashi also to see this information. Rashi b'shasa sakona she'odam mesukon, person is in danger. Kagoni shoya mushloch bebor. An example would be someone who was cast into a pit. The Omar, and he proclaims kol shomea koloi. Anyone who hears his voice, meaning his own voice, yichtov get lishto, shall write a get to divorce, for my wife to be divorced, to be freed up. Kaisvin v'noisvin v'samchinun olei b'chol dvarav she'omer. We will write the get and give it to her based on that which the voice emanating from the pit says. Ani hu ploni ben ploni. I am so and so. I am her husband, and that would be enough. So you can see leniency when you're dealing with extenuating circumstances. So to in our case, if you don't believe this voice, lo timsa acher the teshivaguna, you won't find any other one indicating the death, and she will remain an unmarried, a with restricted woman, unable to remarry. We continue now with a new Mishnah, and on the side, the nosei, the mivneh heading, the nosei, that is the topic heading, mihe maksherim li'edus noshim, who is included in acceptability for information concerning the death of a husband. Omar Rabbi Akiva, Kishiradati l'Naharda, when I descended to Naharda, he apparently traveled from Eretz Yisrael to Babylonia, to the town of Naharda, la'aber hashana, in order to make calculations concerning the extension of a year, in other words, adding a month, we call that a leap year. So when I was on my way to Naharda for that purpose, Motsasi Nechemya Ish Beis Deli, Omar Li, I met this gentleman in Nechemya from Beis Dali, and he told me, Shomati she'ein masiyin es isha be'eretz Yisrael al pi eid echad, Elo Rebbe Yehuda ben Bava. I heard that with the exception of Rebbe Yehuda ben Bava, we would not enable a woman to remarry based on the testimony of a singular witness. The Numesi Loi, and I told him, says Rabbi Akiva, Kain Hadvaram, that is true that everyone argues with Rebbe Yehuda ben Bava. Omar Li, so Nehemiah tells me, Emor lohem mishmi, tell them in my name, Atem yoidim she'amadina mishubeshes begaisos. You know that this region is full of bandits, bands of men that create danger on the roads, and I can't get there myself to tell you the following. Kach mekublani me Rabban Gamliel hazokein. I have the following tradition from Rabbi Gamliel the elder, she masiin es ha'isha al pi eid echad, that we can enable a woman to remarry based on the testimony of a singular witness. Ukshebosi v'rtzeisi advorim lifnei Rabban Gamliel. And when I, says Rabbi Akiva, came and presented the information to Rabbi Gamliel, somach lidvorai, he was happy with what I said, the Omar, and said, motzanu chover l'Rebbe Yehuda ben Bava. We found a colleague, another individual, another opinion to agree with, to support Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, that grants reliance upon a singular witness to enable a woman to remarry. Mitoch Adover Niskar Gamliel Shenergu Harugim Betel Arza, and from that it reminded Gamliel that there were murdered victims in a place called Tel Arza. Vehesi Gamliel Nishosem Al Pi Eid Echad, and Gamliel enabled the wives of those victims to remarry based on the testimony of a mere singular witness. The Huchsiku Lios Masian, and they then accepted upon themselves the ability to have women remarry based on the knowledge of the death of their husbands. Eid mipi eid, mipi eved, mipi isha, mipi shivcha. Information that's gained from, we'll say, second-hand information, where a witness says, I heard from so-and-so that so-and-so died. That's Eid mipi eid. Or from information from a slave, or from a woman, or from a bondmaid. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Oimrim ein masina isha al pi eid echad. And these two great authorities say that you don't enable a woman to remarry based on the testimony of a singular witness. Rabbi Akiva Oimer Loi al pi isha, veloi al pi eved, veloi al pi shivcha, veloi al pi kroivim. And Rabbi Akiva represents an opinion here in this Mishnah saying not to rely on a woman, a slave, a bondmaid, nor relatives. Now we have a bracketed section which enables us to skip the section of this section of Gemara and go right to the continuation of the Mishnah. We just heard Rabbi Akiva present his point of view, and now we skip to the next Mishnah. Omru loi, they told Rabbi Akiva, Maisa bivnei Levi sheholchu le soar ir hatmorim v'cholo echod mehem. There was an incident where Bnei Levi, we'll say it's a group of people, maybe a family, that went to this town, Soar, the city of dates, place where they cultivated date palms. V'cholo echod mehem, and one of them took ill. Ve'viu pundak, and they brought him to an inn. Uv'chazarasam, and on their way back, omru lepundikis ayecha ve'reinu, they sought out their friend that they deposited in this particular inn. Where's our friend? They asked the innkeeper, a lady innkeeper. Nu meis lohem, she told them, meis ukvartiv, he died and I buried him. Vesiu es ishtoi, and they enabled the widow to remarry. Velo tehei kohenes kepundikis, it shouldn't be that a proper kohenes represents a proper Jewish woman, a Bas Yisrael, from pure genealogy. Should she not be any less than the information gleaned from a pundikis? The pundikis being even like a lower figure than a kohenes. Rabbi Akiva had recently, we had just heard said, you don't rely on a woman. What kind of woman? Even a choshev woman and a distinguished woman, you would not rely on her. And they tell Rabbi Akiva about this incident where they relied even on a pundikis. Omar lohem, Rabbi Akiva says back to them, lichashitahei kepundikis ne'emenis. When the situation is like the case of the pundikis, then we will believe her. Now, if we look in Rashi at the underneath the Gemara text, Shlita pundikis ne'emenis. Klomar yimtza davar ze emes sheminu es pundikis shrei lo alel samcha al pi elo lefi tuma hesicha ve'via lahem maklo v'tarmilo. Rabbi Akiva says, according to this version, that they weren't really relying on the pundikis. The pundikis had been telling them a story without intention to actually testify, and she brought them his accoutrements, his walking stick, his haversack, his backpack. The second pshat that you can see in Rashi, as far machim l'chtei kepundikis ne'emenes. Klomar, ba'oise inyan sheminu pundikis havinami shar isha ne'emenes. The way they believed the pundikis, other women would also be believed. Shrei pundikis hoitzia lohen, the pundikis brought him out to them. Val hasimonim samchuen, on the identification marks they relied. So now we go back to the Gemara after hearing Rabbi Akiva's response to them that the case of the pundikis was not a straightforward case of relying on a woman's testimony. Apundikis hoitzia lehem maklo v'tarmilo v'sefer torah shehoya biyado. That's how the Mishnah concludes, that the pundikis produced for them his walking stick, his backpack, and the sefer Torah, the Torah scroll that he had in his possession. And it's through those elements that they were able to identify their friend, but not based on the mere word of the pundikis. We continue on Omid Beis. My griusa the pundikis. From the Mishnah, we saw that the pundikis was considered a lesser figure than a standard woman. So what's the deficiency? The griusa means the deficiency or the lacking in the pundikis that she was described thusly. This was an idol worshipper lady who was the innkeeper. And she was telling them a story. She was telling them when they came into the inn, they said, Zeh maklo, v'zeh tarmilo, v'zeh kevesh shekavartiv bo. This is his stick, this is his backpack, and this is the grave in which I buried him. V'chein toni abo brei de Rav Menyumi barchia, pundikis oivedis kechovim hoisa. So Abba brei de Rav Menyumi tells us that in a Tanaic, he quotes a Tanaic source elaborating on the Mishnah, that it was a pundikis idol worshipper, hoisa, that's who she was, and she was not telling us a piece of testimony, she was telling a story. The Gemara asks, how can you describe her as Mesiach Lefi Tuma when they initiated the investigation? For Ayei Chavereinu Ko Amri La, they initiated by asking, where is our friend? So then, if that's the case, she's not volunteering a story on her own, she's being prompted, and her response then would constitute a form of testimony, and that is not that's not good enough for us to rely on. The Gemara answers, Kevon de Chazisinu Bachya. When they approached the inn, they saw her crying. In other words, Rashi says, before they asked, where is our friend, she started crying. Amru La, they asked her, Ayei Chavereinu. After seeing her crying, they asked, where is our friend? Amra lahem meis ukavartiv. So the fact that there was already, before they prompted her, there was already evidence through her behavior that she initiated, that is the reason upon we are able to rely on her information. Tanu Rabbanan, Maise ba'adam echad shebo lahoid al ha'isha lefnei Rabbi Tarfon. Actually, before we continue with this Tanaic source, we glance at the side under the nosei, the topic heading, do we require cross-examination of the witness when it comes to information information concerning the death of a man, which we call edus noshim, information that enables a woman to remarry. The terms drisha and chakira are very important terms when learning laws concerning testimony. So, and as we said, the Drish B'Chakir involves the investigative type questions that deal with time, with place, questions that help to identify details of the circumstances. In general, Drisha v'chakira is something that is required when you're dealing with two witnesses coming to testify about standard situations that demand, I say standard meaning situations that demand standard testimony, the testimony of two witnesses, two kosher witnesses. In the case of Edus Isha, do we require Drisha v'chakira as well? Of course, we've seen already numerous attempts to be lenient in our requirements regarding testimony of this nature of Edus Isha. What about Drisha v'chakira? So we start the source again. Tonu Rabbanan, Maise ba'adam echad shepo lahoyid al isha. There was an incident with a man that came to testify about on behalf of a woman or for the woman concerning her husband's death. Lefnei Rabbi Tarfon. And the case came to Rabbi Tarfon. Omar Loi. Rabbi Tarfon asks, B'ni hechato yodea be'edus isha. How do you know about this information for this woman? Omar ani v'hu hayinu holchim b'derech. I and her husband were walking on the road. V'rodaf acharenu gayis, and we were pursued by a group of criminals or bandits. V'nitle beyichur shel zayis, and he grabbed an olive branch, upashchoi, and ripped it off the olive tree. V'hichsir es hagayis lachorov, and with that branch, he was able to fend off the gayis, the band of criminals, of threatening individuals. If we skip the brackets for a moment, we read liyomim chola umeis. After a while, the fellow got sick and died. V'heisi Rabbi Tarfon es isha. Upon hearing that story, Rabbi Tarfon enabled the woman to remarry. Following this, the Gemara asks, Rabbi Tarfon lo boy drisha v'chakira, does Rabbi Tarfon not require cross-examination, intensive questioning? And the question itself lasts a number of lines, but before we get to that, we want to take note of the bracketed section. First of all, there's a note that we have on the side. Matras hasograim, the purpose of these brackets is litzor retzef be'edusa shel ho'ish, to enable us to see a continuity in the testimony of the man regarding the death of her husband. The gabi misas ba'ilot shel isha shebesium dvorav siper de liyomim cholo meis. At the end of his speech, his story, we then learn that he took sick, that the husband of this lady took sick and died. Now, we go back to the story where you see the man had said that the husband had ripped off a branch and he fended off the gayis. We now read within the brackets. Almarti loy. This is Rabbi Tarfon speaking. I said to him, Aryeh Yishakoyach. Omar li, the fellow then said to me, Minayin atu yodea sha'aryeh shmi. How do you know that that's my name? Kach korin osi be'iri. In fact, this is what they call me in my town. Yochanan Rabbi Yehonasan Aryeh de Mikvar Shichya. That's how they call me. That's what they call me. They call me the Yochanan, the son of Rabbi Yehonasan Aryeh, from the community, from the town of Shichya. And he continues to tell us that Liyomim Cholo Umeis, and that very fellow who was the warrior type, who was her husband, he died. And Rabbi Tarfon enabled her to remarry. The Gemara now asks, and this question, it is a long question, does Rabbi Tarfon not require, we'll call it intense questioning? We take a look at Rashi. You see the term drisha, the dikois, where we investigate, ki hai gavna l'chavein estvorov. Questions to make sure that what is being told over is straightforward, is reliable. Chakira be'eze yom ube'eze shah. Chakira involves those kind of questions that deal with time. So we don't see that in this story. We don't see Rabbi Tarfon subjecting the bearer of the information to drisha v'chakira. Does Rabbi Tarfon not require that? V'ha Tanya, we have the following source. Rabbi Tarfon, and you'll notice it's the same story, but it's told over in this Tanakh source with added information. So there was this story involving a man coming to Rabbi Tarfon. Isha Omar lo b'ni heich ato yodei desu. Rabbi Tarfon says, you're telling me that so and so died. How do you know this information? Omar lo ani v'hu hoyinu holchim baderech. I and him, her husband, were on the road. V'rodav acharenu gayis v'nitla b'yichur te'ena. And he grabbed a branch of a fig tree. Notice this is where the story is different than what was reported before. He grabbed a branch of a fig tree. Upashchoi v'hichsir sagayis lachorov. He ripped off this branch and repelled the gayis. if we skip the brackets for a moment, Liyomim cholo meis, and after some time went by, he took sick and died. Now, that skipping was simply to maintain the continuity of the fellow's story. But now we go back to the brackets. Amarti lo yasher koichacha aryeh. Power be unto you. All power to you, aryeh. Amarli yafa kivanta lishmi. So the fellow told me, says Rabbi Tarfon, that you got my name accurately. You guessed my name. Shekach koren osi be'iri. In fact, that's what I am called in my town. Yochanan ben Yonasan Berger de mikfar Shichya. V'yomim chalomes, and some time went by, and the fellow took ill and died. That means the husband of the lady that I'm telling you about, he took ill and died. Omar loy. The Rabbi Tarfon says back to this man, Lo kach omarta li, did you not say to me, Yochanan ben Yonasan de mikfar Shichya Berger? Notice the words and the markings. Initially, the fellow had said to Rabbi Tarfon, my name is Yochanan ben Yonasan Berger from the town of Shichya. And now Rabbi Tarfon subjects him to questioning by saying, oh, didn't you say that your name was, and notice the markings, Yochanan ben Yonasan the mikfar Shichya Berger. Notice that Berger is attached to the town's name, that the name of the town was Kfar Shichya Berger, not the name of the speaker. Omar lei, so the man, the information bearer, tells back, he speaks back, he responds to Rabbi Tarfon, lo, that's not what I said. Elokach omarti loch, this is what I told you, Yochanan ben Yonasan Berger to mikfar Shichya. That the Berger is part of my name, not the community's name. V'diktek olav shnayim u'shlosh pamim, and Rabbi Tarfon asked several questions like this 2-3 more times. V'kivein es tvarav, and each time the man was consistent with what he had said earlier. V'heisi Rabbi Tarfon es ishto, and Rabbi Tarfon enabled the man, the widow, to remarry. What we see here in this source is that Rabbi Tarfon really was concerned with the information being subjected, the information bearer being subjected to drisha v'chakira. In the source before, we didn't see that. The Gemara answers or responds and says, Tanoi hi. The issue is a machloikis tanoim, so that we have two Tanaic versions as to what took place based on these two, what's called later Tanaic authorities regarding this matter. Tesanya, and here you see the machloikis tanoim. Ein boikim eidei noshim b'drisha v'chakira, divrei Rabbi Akiva. People indicating that a woman's husband died, those information bearers are not to be subjected to this cross-examination. And Rabbi Tarfon Omer Bothim, yes, they are. V'komifligi b'd Rabbi Chanina, and the machloikis, the controversy that we see here is based on the teaching of Rabbi Chanina. The Amar Rabbi Chanina, Devar Torah echad dinei momenis ve'echad dinei nefoshes b'drisha v'chakir. When it comes to testimony concerning financial matters or capital cases, dinei nefoshes, the witnesses are to be subjected to cross-examination. Shneimar mishpat echad yia lochem. One consistent form of justice, of legal rules apply to all cases. Why is it that in practice information or testimony concerning financial matters is not subjected to drisha v'chakira? In other words, if you have, let us say, two witnesses that come and say, we saw a loan extended from Mr. A to Mr. B. So Mr. B owes money to Mr. A. We hear the testimony of those witnesses, and we take that at face value. We don't subject the witnesses to the intense questioning that we described earlier. So why is that so? Why is that's the way we practice law? That we we don't subject witnesses in matters of finance, of money, to Drisha v'Hakira. Answer: Shelo tinoil deles b'fnei lovin. Literally means so that we don't lock the door in the face of people seeking out loans. What does that mean on a more practical level? A person will not loan money unless he has a sense of confidence that he'll be able to get it back, to collect his loan. If we were to subject witnesses who witness loan extensions, loan givings, to Drisha v'Hakira, in many cases, witnesses can be tripped up. They can mess up in some area of detail in the testimony, which would be revealed through the Drisha v'Hakira. Let me say, that wouldn't indicate that they're actual liars, but it would be enough to show us that they can't be relied upon because there's some kind of inconsistency in their testimony. And if we reveal this inconsistency, if we follow the letter of the law, we're going to throw them out, and then the individual, the lender, is not going to have witnesses to verify the loan that he extended. So now, as we said, it'll be easy to trip up witnesses in Dine Mominus, and people hearing or aware of this will say, I'm not going to take a chance in extending loans to people, knowing that the people that witness it will end up getting tripped up because of the Drisha v'Hakira. So it's to the ultimate benefit of borrowers, people seeking out loans, that witnesses are not subjected to Drisha v'Hakira, so as to encourage the lenders to extend loans. So that's as far as Dine Mominus are concerned. So just to review, when it comes to non-Dine Mominus, Dine Nefoshes, Dine Nefoshes includes all kinds of capital cases. For example, a married woman that has intimacy with another man other than her husband is guilty of a capital offense. And she could be put to death. That's called Dine Nefoshes. The Gemara continues, Uvemai komifligi. After learning Rabbi Hanina's teaching that there's a distinction between Dine Mominus and Dine Nefoshes on a practical level, how does this information help show the basis of the Machlokas Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Tarfon? The Gemara continues, More Sovar, the opinion that says we don't subject Eidei Noshim to Drisha v'Hakira, holds Kevon Deiko Ksuba Lemishgal, since part of the information is the lady, when she learns that she is a widow, she then will collect the money that was guaranteed to her when she got married, which we refer to as the Ksuba. Lemishgal means to take. Since there is the Ksuba for her to collect, Kedine Mominus Domi, the information concerning her husband's death is Dine Mominus related. And as we saw, when it comes to witnesses concerning Dine Mominus, we do not subject them to Drisha v'Hakira. Umor Sava, the opinion that says we do check out the witnesses with Drisha v'Hakira, Kevon de Koshabrinon Eishes Ish La'almo, since the net result of this testimony is that the woman who was up till now known as a married woman is now released and permitted to marry someone else. kedine nefashis dami. That classifies this testimony as dine nefashis, that which is of a capital nature. So it's based on how do you look at, or what do you emphasize with regard to information in which it said Meis Ploni, that so and so died, with regard to Eidus Isha. Do we emphasize the mominous aspect, or do we emphasize the nefashos aspect? That's the basis of the machlokes. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Talmidei Chachomim Marbim Shalom Ba'olam. The presence of Torah scholars and their study of Torah increases peace in the world. Shneimar, V'chol bonayach limudei Hashem, V'rav Shalom bonayach. The text is found in other Gemaras, is added on the side, Al Tikri bonayach. Don't read it as your sons, Ella bonayach, your builders. And that's a reference to the Torah scholars who help build the world, and through their study of Torah, they are the reason or the basis of the increase of peace in this world. And as you can see, we have with this shiur completed Maseches Yevamos, and hope and pray to the Almighty that He will give us strength and good health to review this Masechta as well as all other Masechtas that we have studied. With that, we conclude our shiur for today.